perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Nurses on strike. Good morning, this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, and today we're exploring the biggest issues in our politics. Of course, the nurses' dispute. Will it be solved? Can it be solved? The Prime Minister is meeting with the Irish Taoiseach as well at the British Irish Council. That Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford will be there too. What's it all about? And, of course, the US midterms may well have ended Trumpism. Have they? We'll explore that, as well as the ban on onshore wind farms. Sir Keir Starmer is visiting one today. Will that ban survive? All that after the headlines.
A very good morning. It's 9:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak will meet with leaders of the devolved nations and Irish Premier today for the first time since becoming Prime Minister. He's expected to urge the nations to work together and build a future defined by unity. Mr Sunak will meet his Irish counterpart Michael Martin, the First Ministers Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford at the British Irish Council Summit in Blackpool. The absence of a power-sharing executive means Northern Ireland won't be represented by any politicians at the talks. President Joe Biden says it was a good day for democracy and America after voters cast their final ballots in the US midterm elections. The White House shared video of the president last night congratulating many Democrats who'd won hard-fought races. Control of the Senate still hangs in the balance, but Republicans look set to take the House of Representatives. The result, though, results have defied expectations, with many experts predicting a red wave of Republican victories. America's top general estimates more than 100,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded since the start of the war in Ukraine. General Mark Milley estimates Kyiv may well have suffered a similar number of casualties. He puts the figure of civilians killed in the war so far at around 40,000. The Kremlin yesterday announced the withdrawal of Russian forces from the strategic southern city of Kherson. And the former Chancellor Philip Hammond has told GB News he supports a windfall tax for oil and gas companies. In an exclusive interview with Gloria De Piero, he said he'd be surprised if the current Chancellor fails to extend the windfall tax. Jeremy Hunt announces his autumn statement next Thursday. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak had previously announced the tax when he was Chancellor, describing it as a 25% energy profits levy. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Tom with the briefing.
Good morning, it's 9:37 and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, the British-Irish Council is taking place tomorrow in Blackpool, with the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak set to meet Taoiseach Michael Martin. But what on earth is the British-Irish Council, and what will the aims of this meeting be? Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, who's expected to attend as well, has this week extended the deadline for an executive to be formed at Stormont, and therefore avoiding calling an election. I'm delighted to be joined now by Catherine Forster, our political reporter in Westminster. And Catherine, the British-Irish Council was formed as a result of the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, 2 decades ago. Why hasn't a Prime Minister attended it for a decade?
That's a very good question. The last Prime Minister to go was Gordon Brown all the way back in 2007, some 15 years ago. Basically, it was set up so that the governments of Ireland, the United Kingdom, including the devolved governments of Scotland and Wales, as well as the Westminster government, the Northern Irish government, and the Crown dependencies, Jersey, Guernsey, so on, could get together and talk about things that were in their mutual interest and improve cooperation. Now, obviously, this time, there will be an intense focus on what to do to get power sharing back up and running in Northern Ireland. The Northern Irish government, of course, is not represented today and tomorrow because it, in fact, does not currently exist. There is no functioning government in Northern Ireland as a result of the Democratic Unionist Party's refusal to go back into government while the issues around the Northern Irish Protocol are unaddressed. So Rishi Sunak has a meeting with the Irish Taoiseach Michael Martin. We'll be watching to see what progress may be made around the protocol. Certainly, the mood music is positive. It seems to be they want to do a deal. They want to get power sharing up and running. Chris Heaton-Harris, Minister of State for Northern Ireland, was on the channel just a few minutes ago stressing that as well. So time will tell. Obviously, the deadline for election has now been pushed back to January, to give negotiators time to come up with some sort of deal which will remove this roadblock of the protocol. Also worth noting that Rishi Sunak today will be meeting with First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, and will be filling them in as well on plans for the autumn statement, which is due a week today. So Rishi Sunak trying to build bridges all across the United Kingdom and with Ireland today.
Really interesting stuff, and I just wonder whether or not this means that the government believes a deal with Europe is very, very close. The delaying of this election calling in Northern Ireland, the first meeting of the British-Irish Council involving a Prime Minister in 15 years, it does all feel like something might well be happening behind the scenes, like cogs may well be turning. It's one to keep an eye on very closely. But for now, Catherine Forster, political reporter here for GB News, thank you very much for joining us and going over that important issue. We will, of course, be following it as it develops. But next today, nurses have voted to strike in a dispute over pay, with action expected before the end of this year, of course, at a time when the NHS is normally under incredible strain. It'll be the first UK-wide action ever carried out by the Royal College of Nursing, which represents around 500,000 nurses. It comes as the NHS faces what could be its worst ever winter crisis due to these staff shortages and a potential twindemic of COVID and flu. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Roy Lilly, who can... thank you very much for joining us this morning, Roy. First of all, the nurses' unions are demanding a 17% pay rise. Why on earth is that affordable or realistic?
Oh, good morning. I don't think it is, as much as a huge sympathy for the NHS's nurses' pay and remuneration. I mean, it's true, over the last 10 years, they've seen the value of their income erode by 20% because of inflation. So, I mean, they've got a case. But 17%, I mean, if you just do some back-of-the-fact packet numbers, if you say the average nurse is earning, say, $30,000 a year, I mean, there's a lot less than that and a lot more, but just, take that figure as a guide. And 17% of that pushes it, well over an extra £5,000. There are 250,000 nurses who are probably on the agenda for change contract. You do the maths, and the Treasury's then looking at both barrels of £1 billion, plus national insurance contributions, plus pension contributions. So, with the best will in the world, the way the economy is, I mean, I guess we'll find out more next week in the autumn statement, but it's a big ask.
It's a huge ask of an enormous amount of money. And I just wonder how the public will respond to this, given that everyone probably thinks that people should be paid more. Of course, that's a natural thing to think. But comparing nurses' wages with wages in the private sector, especially when we include all of the different benefits, particularly the gold-plated pensions that people have in the public sector, it's fascinating. We've got a graph here to show what the contributions of nurses are. I think we can show this now in terms of what nurses actually earn. And if we include the annual accrued pension benefit on top of some of the unsocial hours pay that they get, nurses outside London, on average, that benefit, that value, comes to £50,000 a year. For those that work inside London, that's £60,000 a year. We're not talking about people on poverty wages here.
No, you're right, and I agree. And of course, you put your finger on it, Tom, when you say it's how the public are going to react. I mean, normally, if you go on strike, if you work for a supermarket, for example, you go on strike, the idea is to deny the employer the income from sales because the shop is closed due to a strike. That's kind of straightforward. But if you look at the government situation, we've got trusts who are actually the employers. They hold the contracts of employment, but the terms and conditions are negotiated by the Department of Health on a national basis. So the trusts can do nothing to influence what is going to happen here. Now, if you get to a situation where the public are going to say, do you know what? The nurses don't do too badly. I've got a couple of kids who are working at the moment. They haven't had a pay rise. I haven't had a pay rise. And you know what? My granny's waiting for a new hip. Call it quits, kids. Let's get to the end of this strike. And that, I think, is what the government will be gambling on. I mean, they've come out this morning with a very strong message. They said that we've given everybody the pay review body recommendations, which were 4.5%, 4.75%. They paid that. Everybody's getting help with their electricity and gas bills and what have you. I mean, I think the government are going to try and tough this out. But, well, I guess we'll see. There won't be a strike, I don't think, until just before Christmas. But I think they'll tough it out.
Well, hopefully something can be agreed. No doubt not the 17% pay rise being demanded, but perhaps something more akin to what people in the private sector are getting this year.
I think, Tom, they'll split it in two. It'll end up with 6% this year, 6% next year. They'll have to do it like that if they want to talk. But Steve Barclay doesn't look to me like he wants to talk.
Really interesting stuff. Well, Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust chairman, thank you very much for joining us here on The Briefing this morning. We'll have to see if those predictions come true. Next today, Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey called on Rishi Sunak yesterday in the Commons to lift what he describes as a ban on onshore wind farms. And today, the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, is visiting a wind farm, where he'll be speaking to industry leaders and no doubt calling on the government to clear up their position on this issue. Of course, in her brief premiership, Liz Truss announced an end to the effective ban on onshore wind farms. Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget, much maligned though it was, said that planning for onshore wind should be brought in line with planning for other infrastructure. Yet, of course, Rishi Sunak has ripped up so much of that mini-budget. But just how costly is this ban on producing our own energy with onshore wind? I'm delighted to be joined now by Christina Rabakite, energy expert and CEO at energy market analyst firm Papaya. Thank you for joining us, Christina. Firstly, this idea that it's basically impossible to build an onshore wind farm in this country, that has to make energy more expensive.
Absolutely. I think we've now lost so many years of not building onshore wind, and we can see, it's perfectly reflected in the prices that people are paying today, and it's really, really devastating. Because it could have really helped us out in the crisis like this one. But as I said, wind farms are not enough. We have to think broader about sort of how we're going to manage the intermittency of wind farms as well, and look at battery storage.
Yes, it's a really important point that it is an intermittent form of energy. But I suppose I look at every single political party at the moment in the United Kingdom, and the Tories are opposing onshore wind, the Labour Party are opposing shale gas, the SNP are opposing nuclear energy, the Liberal Democrats are opposing just about anything being built anywhere. If you take all of these politicians up together, we have no energy investment. Surely, in an energy crisis, you'd expect politicians to be going all, and at the moment, they're going nothing.
I know, it sounds like we should just grab our coats and just go and live in a forest with the news like this. But that's, I mean, I completely agree. There's certainty for entrepreneurs in renewable industry and general, energy industry. It's just been such a mess. How are you meant to commit to build anything at all when, maybe in a few months or a few years when the new government steps in, they might ban it again? So, there's massive risk of investing and building anything right now. And, I think this is probably the most unstable we've ever been, because we had some good news on the onshore wind, and then a month later that's gone. That was taken back again. So it's just very, very hard for anybody to commit and actually build something out at the moment.
It's fascinating how the U-turns that politicians make, and my gosh, there have been so many U-turns in the last 6 months or so, those have real-world market impacts. That damages consumer confidence, not just consumer confidence, investment confidence in the United Kingdom and the ability to get stuff built, to get the economy grown. What would your message as an energy expert be to the government here today in terms of, I suppose, creating a more stable environment for investment?
Correct. So that's exactly what I'd like to say. We absolutely need stability to know how to go about building new renewables, building other assets to support the system. And the government really needs to align a plan that is broad enough to cover all the technologies necessary for us to have both sort of carbon neutral future and also stable future that will deliver for day-to-day needs. Because at the moment, Labour is sort of talking about quadrupling solar and just building a lot of onshore wind, but that's not enough. There is an intermittent technology that needs support and needs leveling out with other technologies such as batteries, where I've not heard some governments talking about hydrogen that much recently again. So it's absolutely key that every technology that is needed, including gas, including nuclear, and including wind and solar and hydro and aerobic digestion and batteries, everything is pulled into one plan and then delivered accordingly. And the confidence is given to the investors that if any rules are going to come out in the next few months, they will stay in place, so they actually want to put the money in because they know there's going to be stability where they can get their payback and not going to go under because some sort of ban has been introduced later down the line.
Well, Christina Rabakite, thank you so much for talking us through that. It's so interesting how so often all politicians need to do is set the rules. They don't need to plunge taxpayers' money into stuff. They need to create that environment for investment and things can get better. Really interesting stuff there. Thank you for joining us this morning. Finally, today, the Democrats in the United States seem to have managed to halt much of the anticipated red wave. Yes, President Joe Biden has expressed that results so far has made him breathe a sigh of relief. So what happened on Tuesday? Has the so-called Republican red wave really stilted? Well, I'm joined now by Greg Swenson, the chairman of Republicans Overseas. And Greg, it does seem to be the case that aside from, in some places, Florida being a notable example, exception perhaps, the Republicans didn't make the gains that many people were expecting.
Yeah, real missed opportunity for the Republicans. I mean, the election was set up so well. You had a very weak president, polling in the low 40s. You had policies that were, like it or not, causing misery for Americans. So, you know, the Democratic and Biden policies that caused the inflation, caused the humanitarian crisis at the border, caused crime to increase in cities. You know, it was really well set up. And I think the challenge was that the Republicans didn't take advantage of that because they didn't articulate what they would do. They just many of them just ran on Biden's bad and the Democrats are horrible, not here's what we're going to do about these problems. I think there's some lessons to be learned here. And I think the postmortem or the sort of Monday morning quarterbacking will start today or started yesterday to figure out really what went wrong tactically, but a real missed opportunity, but we'll learn from it.
To what extent do you think that the big looming shadow of Donald Trump over many of these candidates, many of them personally endorsed by Mr. Trump, particularly Pennsylvania, a big example, a hand-picked candidate by Mr. Trump who didn't win, was Trump a drag on some of these candidates?
As it turns out, yes. I didn't think it would be as dramatic as it was. I know the Democrats and their media allies in the U.S. were trying to make it about Trump. The Mar-a-Lago raid increased Trump's visibility, and in fact, his poll numbers went up after Mar-a-Lago. But I think they did have some success at making it more about Trump. But he contributed that too. I mean, this is not all on the media and the left. He went to these rallies and talked about himself more than he talked about the candidates, particularly with Oz in Pennsylvania, J.D. Vance in Ohio. So I think he made some mistakes, and I think there'll be some lessons learned here.
And clearly this, to some extent, blows open a Republican primary for 2 years' time for the presidential nomination. Many people are now saying that perhaps Trump is a bit of a busted flush, and this guy, Ron DeSantis, is looking like he's leading the pack.
Without a doubt. I've been saying for months that DeSantis would be a better candidate because he's 44 years old. He can serve 2 terms. Trump can only serve 1. He's got a much better appeal to voters, to suburban voters. There's a lot of reasons to think Ron DeSantis is a better candidate. After Tuesday, it's really obvious now. I mean, the winner of this election really was Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott in Texas and Sununu in New Hampshire. There were some winners here, but I think the biggest loser is Trump.
It's interesting, looking at the front page of the Times of London here, Ron DeSantis waving in front of that big American flag, and indeed a very similar picture on the front page of the Telegraph as well. It does seem to be that Ron DeSantis is almost the new golden boy of the GOP.
He is. He's been anointed here. And that's thanks to Trump's missteps during this midterm election. So a lot of that's on Trump. But of course, DeSantis won this election by almost 20 points.
Wow.
He won it by 34,000 votes in 2018. And now he's winning it by at least 1.5 million votes.
And Florida's the state that Obama used to win.
Absolutely.
This is not
they typically vote for the winners. It's been a swing state. Another outcome of this election is it's pretty clear that Florida and Ohio are now solidly red states. Every statewide office is held by a Republican in Florida. Look for Ron DeSantis. I've been saying it for 2 years because of his COVID policies. He crushed it on COVID. He didn't lock down. He kept kids in school. He fights back against the media. He's handled everything perfectly. He's fought wokeism very well. And he's also a Hollywood candidate, Navy SEAL, commissioned officer, Harvard, Yale,
well, it'll be a
beautiful wife, blah, blah, blah.
Fascinating fight to see.
It's great to see.
To see if Donald Trump actually takes the fight to him. Ron DeSanctimonious was a nickname that was invented very recently. Well, that's it from me today. Coming up, it's Bev Turner Today, so catch her over the next 2 hours. I'm back at 9:30 tomorrow.
Good morning. We won't see as much sunshine today as we did yesterday. It's going to be another blustery day, though, and a very mild day, and particularly mild overnight tonight. Last night, we've had milder air tracking in from the southwest, this warmer air enveloping the country, bringing with it also some gusty winds. These weather fronts also bringing with them a fairly wet day across the Western Isles of Scotland and parts of the Highlands. The rain persistent here and at times heavy. Also, that's where the strongest winds will be, but it's going to be fairly gusty wherever you are today. A bit of drizzly rain at times across North Wales, Northwest England, mostly over hills. For many, it will be a dry day, just predominantly cloudy. We could see some breaks in the cloud across the east, a bit of sunshine. May see temperatures reach 17 degrees, but even where it's cloudy, look at these, 15, 16 across the board. Very mild for this time of year. It's going to be an exceptionally mild night. We will keep wet weather across northwest Scotland. Some rain pushing back into Northern Ireland, perhaps into southern Scotland as well. Some drizzly conditions for England and Wales here and there, but most will just stay dry and cloudy. The winds will ease a touch overnight, but still wafting in the mild air. 13, 14, the overnight minimum temperatures. That's above the average maximum for most of us at this time of year. So a very mild start to tomorrow. It's a similar kind of day, certainly for most of England and Wales. Generally cloudy but dry. Some drizzle, most likely over the hills of Wales and northwest England. But there will be more persistent rain for northwest Scotland.